All right, first of all, thanks everyone for braving the elements and the traffic to come here to learn all about AI pair programming tools. To give you a little bit of context on my background and my connection to the topic, I'm a co-founder at Faros, and basically for the last 4 years, I've been working on building this data platform that hooks into every part of the software development lifecycle and gives visibility into velocity, quality, throughput, developer satisfaction, and so on. And so now as we see AI impacting every part of the software development lifecycle, like from writing code to code reviews to test automation and so on, you're going to see the need for visibility a lot more, right? Because there's going to be shifting bottlenecks, downstream impacts, and so on that need to be measured. And so I'm deeply interested in this topic, and I'm very excited to have world-class experts in the field as our panelists today. So we have Anand from Bito. Bito's AI helps developers dramatically accelerate their impact. We have Kasia, a staff product manager leading growth for GitHub Enterprise Cloud, Copilot, and Advanced Security. And we have Scott, who leads developer infrastructure and corporate technology with an emphasis on integrating observability. Okay, so maybe to start off with, Kasia, since you're at the forefront of this really seismic shift that we're seeing happening right now, what are some of your interesting stories from the field? What are challenges that organizations are facing in adopting these tools? What are some of the success stories and so on?
Sure. Hi, everyone. One of the observation that we are seeing from the field is that a big component to innovation is to make developers feel empowered. And what does it mean? Empowering developers, pretty much making them work better, faster, efficient, and provide them in a flow and just overall happiness of developers' state of mind. And what we learned that actually AI tools like GitHub Copilot brings that efficiency, therefore brings the innovation to the product. And we ran this research where we learned that 92% of developers that are based in the US are already adopting and using some kind of AI tools into their programming, either like for personal or work. And through those tools like Copilot, they're actually seeing that innovation happening in the workspace and personal projects. So definitely AI plays a big role. In terms of the challenges of adopting AI per programming tools, I think it's the biggest problem is change management. Meaning that organizations and companies have a hard time in terms of understanding how that benefits the product and also how to use it properly. So at GitHub, we spend a lot of time with the field to do seminars, webinars, lunch and learns, and trying to bring a lot of data to the organizations and those leaders who are deciding to purchase GitHub Copilot. So I think that's the biggest challenge. And what we are seeing from success stories, so Indra, for example, it's a company who is providing product like Galileo, which is like the most precise satellite navigation system. And during COVID, they struggled with hiring top talent. So they decided to go for GitHub Copilot and to bring the innovation not only for their product, but at the same time, the tools that they are using. So they were able to actually bring that innovation, hire interesting developers and talented developers, and bring that satisfaction and into their product. So I guess that's what we are observing from the field.
for organizations that have adopted these tools, what percentage of all the code that's being written would you say is being generated by?
Yeah, so actually the numbers that we are seeing at GitHub is over 46% of the code at GitHub is generated with GitHub Copilot.
That's pretty amazing. So I guess maybe as a sort of a follow-on to that, Scott, so when we work with organizations and we've helped them sort of A/B test different pair programming tools, what is your advice as someone who heads up the productivity and infrastructure function? What is some advice that you would give organizations on how should they compare their options and make decisions on whether to invest in this tool or that tool? And
yeah, great question. So honestly, I was a sort of AI skeptic. January last year, our CEO was really interested in sort of trying out Copilot. But, I was a little apprehensive on, what would it do to code quality, how helpful would it actually be to be able to measure it. So we started out quite simply with just a pilot. So we picked 200 engineers randomly across the organization. And we split them into 2 cohorts. Each week we would ask a different cohort what their experience was. And we just sort of set them loose on Copilot. I think one of the interesting things is it was month to month. So like the commitment wasn't for a whole year. It was really easy for us just to try out and see what the experience was. Initially, we had like a 2-month pilot sort of staged out that we were going to try. But the results were sort of so positive after the first 3 weeks that we just canceled the pilot and just rolled it out to everyone. So I think when the sort of sentiment questions we were asking was how often were you accepting changes? And it was sort of the standard Likert scale of always, most of the time, sometimes, hardly ever, and never. And, the sort of 80% of people were accepting changes most of the time. So we sort of really realized the value it was adding for, our engineering cohorts and engineering population. I think one of the unique things at Stripe is we have every single part of the engineer workflow instrumented. So every time they run like git pull, we know how long it took, what branch they were in, and sort of how long, how many refs they were pulling down from GitHub. We understand every time they run a linter, every time they run a unit test, every time they run a build step. So we're really able to sort of understand the sort of end-to-end experience that engineers have. And then the overall metric is branch to master. So from them creating the branch to getting it sort of merged into master, how long was that taking? And we saw with those that were using Copilot that they were faster than those that weren't. So we've been really excited about it. We just sort of tried it, and organic adoption really sort of helped. But yeah, not a very scientific approach, but one that really sort of worked.
But it sounds like you already have a lot of that measurement in place in Stripe to give you the confidence in going forward.
Yeah.
Anand, I think AI pair programming tools are just sort of the tip of the iceberg, right? There's going to be a lot more happening. Do you have, could you give us a sense of what's coming in the next 3 to 5 years?
Yeah, so if you kind of look out, 4 to 5 years, what we are seeing is, if you kind of look at developers, how they're using AI solutions today is actually build automation for things that they are not able to do on a daily basis, but want to get done. One of the examples was CodeRabbit out here for, doing code review. So what we see is in the future, there will be an army of agents or tools, right? Which developers, will use. And these tools will understand your organization, its data, your code, so that developers can unleash them to actually work on, organize, and manage tasks. And these tasks can be complete workflows or something that you can basically on an ad hoc basis, like, generating test cases for which people don't have time, fixing code smells, which have been there for a couple of years, but you just don't have developers to actually put out there and manage it. So software development is going to transform, and we believe that the areas wherein you have resource crunch or you have a higher cycle time will be the areas wherein these tools will come up first. And these tools will then help developers focus more on what they need to do, critical thinking, architecture, design, because with Copilot you don't need to write code from scratch, but you have to verify, validate that you're kind of building something which satisfies the needs of the business. So that is where we'll see the future will be.
Got it. And I guess in terms of best practices and training for adopting this kind of tooling, what has been your experience in the field? Like when we deployed Copilot at Faros, we were very informal. Do you recommend a certain approach to how companies roll this out? And are there certain teams that would benefit more from it, or what have your experiences been?
So I think it really depends on the size of the company and your objectives. But letting that product to be used by a specific team, like as an early adopter, and then educating other teams on how to use it, what are the best practices, and so on. And I think like with any generative AI or LLMs, I think it takes time to figure out like, hey, what are the right prompts and so on. So having that rollout being, you can start with a small, or like in case of the Stripe, it was a big sample size, 200 people, right? So it really depends, but having engineers play with the technology, kind of understand it and use it, that's the best approach. And it really depends on the objective of the company, like what are the problems you're solving with it. So
I think one of the things, the teams we worked with found was that senior engineers seem to benefit more from these kinds of tools. And has that been your experience too?
Yeah, I think one of the things we noticed at Stripe was senior engineers knew what they were going to type, so they started typing it, and then Copilot pops up with like, would you like me to autocomplete this? So I think senior engineers found it a lot more intuitive because it was able to sort of complete their next thought. I think we found with like those earlier on in their career, they didn't really know what they were going to write, so didn't know how to give the initial prompt.
I see.
So I think they're going to be more interested in the sort of prompt base, like explaining what you want it to do, which I think is in Copilot X.
So do you see like the skills that developers are going to need? How do you see that changing with these kinds of tools?
So I think developers will need to get better at collaborating with AI tools. Let me put it that way, because it's generative AI. You ask questions, right? But if you don't ask right questions, you're not going to get right answers. So yeah, senior developers are able to use it better because they understand the business context, they understand the architecture, they know exactly what they want, and giving the precise instructions to actually get the desired outcome is a skill, and not everybody is able to communicate in that fashion. So if you kind of look at all the literature out there, people talk about prompt engineering. It's basically some people, get it easy of what to ask and how to phrase the question, whereas some people don't. But getting to know, these things will help developers. And also, the thing about what are the capabilities that these tools provide? Because, people, just think that, it's AI, I can ask it anything. But, it does have data that it has learned from. It cannot go beyond it and stuff like that. So they need to know the capabilities and limitations. And then all the other aspects, I think, that a software developer should have, those are required.
So it sounds like communication is, once again, very important. I think a lot of folks have curiosity about what is the quality of the suggestions that you get, right? And so does Copilot provide any metrics or insight into quality?
Yeah, so at GitHub, we provide 2 telemetry APIs in terms of the activation, like have you assigned the license and when and so on, and how many people have pending invitation, and the usage, right? It's like, so what is the number of accepted suggestions and so on. In terms of the code quality, we at GitHub do a lot of research and try to understand what is a high quality code, right? Like what is the definition? And we developed those 5 metrics, meaning that is code readable, reusable, concise, maintainable, and resilient. And we run a study group where we ask developers to use GitHub Copilot and see how the quality code will improve with Copilot and Copilot Chat. And we actually saw a significant improvement in the code quality and also like the speed. So there's enough evidence that AI tools actually help developers with their code quality.
I guess what are some of the metrics that as the scale of writing code and it's going to accelerate, what are the downstream impacts, and like what are some of the things that teams should be monitoring in terms of ensuring trustworthiness and reliability of the code that's getting shipped out there?
So I think one of the things we've seen is Copilot will copy paste a lot of code. So it's not necessarily familiar with, your own internal library helpers. So it will sort of reach back into either the common framework from the language or, the common base framework the open source is based on, and it will try to sort of import suggestions for there. We've been holding it to the same bar that we do humans. So it goes through the same amount of tests, the same amount of linters, the same amount of, X-ray checks against it. But I think one of the things that I'm really trying to keep track on is like the growth of the code base. Is it using well-known invariants that we have internally? So I think that's maybe an important thing to keep a track on. And I'm excited for custom models sort of built around your code base.
What's coming up, I guess? What is in the what are the new features that are coming up?
Yeah, so in February, we are releasing GitHub for Enterprises, where, as Scott said, you can do fine-tuning and there will be more chat functionality overall. And what's next? Aiden, he was presenting earlier from GitHub Next. So I think a very exciting product that is coming out is GitHub Workspaces, where you can actually start your programming with like just GitHub issue. And personally, I think that we are at the beginning of the stage where actually right now it's just simple tasks and automations and efficiency, but eventually AI will be your second brain. Mm-hmm. So I think that's where we are heading and the direction that LLMs will take us.
I guess, yeah. So I guess going off of that, today we're in this position where the human's really driving it and AI is just the assistant. But do you see these roles reversing, and in what kind of time frame?
So, I'm not the Matrix Oracle, so I can't see the future. But in next, I'd say 3 to 4 years, not all the tasks, but, where humans are driving and, they don't need to be there. For example, I'm writing code and I don't have time to write test code. Can I actually use an AI agent or a tool which does it automatically, right? So those kind of changes are going to happen. But for that, we have to also look at the human sentiment and, this behavior change. As we just talked about, like developers have to be responsible for the code that AI generates. There has to be a trust built by these AI tools. So if you're using a test code generator or if you're using a code review tool, you will first verify how these are working. Are these suggestions good? Is the code good? It's kind of taking care of code coverage and all those things. But once you believe, as you hire a new engineer, you train him, and then once you believe, you hand off the responsibility, the same thing will happen. Like some of these tools will start taking that responsibility. But, humans will still be there in driving seat, configuring and providing, guidance to these tools of how to evolve or what to do.
Yeah, there'll be a dream when you can just rely on them for migrations.
You'll need AGI for that.
So I think with that, we're wrapping up. At 5 p.m., we have a workshop on how to measure ROI, developer sentiment, and A/B test AI tools for software development. So please join us at 5 o'clock. I think it's going to be somewhere there. Thank you so much for this discussion.
Thank you.